Would you pick one of us? A girl's question to a millionaire, and what he does shocks everyone. Sophia had never imagined herself at a place like this. The grand ballroom of the city's most luxurious hotel gleamed under sparkling chandeliers, casting soft, golden light across the polished marble floors. Crystal glasses clinked, laughter floated through the air, and the soft hum of a string quartet filled the background. Everywhere she looked, people moved gracefully, dressed in elegant gowns and tailored suits, their faces polished with confidence and the easy air of privilege. She felt out of place, almost invisible, standing at the edge of the room with her simple dress and neatly combed hair. Her mother had whispered encouragement that morning, adjusting her scarf and reminding her to be polite, to smile, and to speak clearly if she ever got the chance. But as Sophia took in the scene, she couldn't help but feel a pang of self-doubt. Everyone here seemed so certain, so comfortable in a world that had always seemed just beyond her reach. Sophia had been invited to the charity event because of the small nonprofit project she had started in her neighborhood, a project dedicated to helping children who, like her once, had few opportunities for education and personal growth. It was a modest initiative, mostly funded by local donations and small fundraisers, but it had gained attention for its sincerity and impact. And now, somehow, she had been invited to rub shoulders with some of the city's wealthiest and most influential figures. As she walked along the edges of the crowd, Sophia's eyes caught sight of him, Adrian Cole. She had heard stories of him for years, how he had risen from a small, struggling family to become one of the wealthiest men in the country. His name was spoken with admiration, respect, and sometimes envy. And here he was, standing quietly near the back, observing the guests with a thoughtful expression, a faint smile on his lips, almost as if he were measuring the energy of the room. Unlike everyone else, he didn't seem to need the room's applause or attention. Sophia felt a strange pull toward him. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the courage that often came when someone was desperate to be seen and heard. She walked closer, keeping her steps quiet and deliberate, rehearsing in her mind what she might say. Her heart raced, but not from fear alone. It was a mix of excitement, hope, and the strange feeling that she was about to do something bold. When she reached him, she cleared her throat softly and said the words that had been forming in her mind for weeks. "Would you pick one of us?" The question hung in the air like a sudden note of music. For a moment, no one moved. A few guests near the buffet tables glanced over, some raising eyebrows, others unsure if she was joking. The room seemed to shrink for a heartbeat, all the noise fading into silence around her. Adrian's gaze met hers. It was calm but intense, as though he were peering into the very core of her question. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, considering the girl standing before him with courage in her eyes. Sophia felt herself holding her breath. She had expected surprise, perhaps a polite smile, but not this deep, measured attention that made her feel as if her question mattered. I mean, Sophia continued, her voice steady despite the flutter in her chest, if you had to choose someone to give a chance, a life-changing opportunity, who would it be? She paused, her words sincere, simple, and unpretentious. Not just money, something real. Someone who could do something good if given the chance. Adrian's expression softened. He had been to countless charity events, seen people ask for donations, witnessed flattery, ambition, and sometimes desperation. But rarely had he been confronted with honesty so pure, so unassuming. There was no showmanship, no hidden agenda in her eyes, just a genuine hope that maybe, somehow, she could be seen for her potential rather than her circumstances. The people around them murmured quietly, some exchanging curious glances. A few older women whispered, "What a bold little girl," while a young man nearby smirked, unsure whether to be amused or impressed. Sophia ignored the whispers, keeping her gaze on Adrian. Her hands fidgeted slightly, twisting the hem of her dress, but her stance remained confident. Adrian leaned back just slightly, crossing his arms as if to buy a moment of thought. He was used to making decisions quickly, business decisions, investment decisions, even charitable contributions. But this was different. This was not a spreadsheet or a report. This was a human being, standing in front of him with nothing but hope and honesty, asking a question that challenged the very nature of choice itself. Sophia remembered all the times she had felt invisible in her life. Growing up in a small neighborhood, resources had been scarce. Her parents worked tirelessly to provide for her and her younger brother, often taking second jobs just to ensure that Sophia could attend school and have books to read at home. She had learned early that opportunities were rare, and that most people got ahead not through merit alone but through luck, connections, or wealth. Yet here she was, daring to ask someone who had it all to notice her, to see her not as just another face in the crowd, but as someone with potential, ideas, and heart. Adrian's gaze softened further. He noticed the quiet strength in her posture, the earnestness in her tone. He could see that this girl had ambition, yes, but also compassion. And compassion, he thought, was something money could rarely buy, something that could change the world if nurtured correctly. The crowd, now aware that something unusual was unfolding, watched silently. Some shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure how to react to a child daring to confront a millionaire directly. Others were captivated, leaning in slightly, sensing the authenticity of the moment. It was rare, almost unheard of, for someone so young and so unpolished to speak with such clarity at an event designed for networking, power, and spectacle. Sophia felt the weight of her question, but also a strange lightness. She had spoken her truth, and in doing so she had stepped into a moment that was larger than herself. The fear that had accompanied her into the room, the fear of inadequacy, of being overlooked, of being dismissed, began to fade. She realized that sometimes, asking the right question mattered more than having the perfect answer. Adrian finally spoke, his voice calm but firm, carrying over the gentle music and low murmurs of the guests. "That is a very good question," he said. "One I don't get asked often, and one I've never had to answer in quite this way." He smiled slightly, not the polite smile of a public figure, but the small, genuine smile of someone connecting in a real human way. Sophia's heart beat faster. She had not expected him to take her seriously. She had only hoped for a polite acknowledgement. But now, here he was, engaging with her question with the full weight of consideration. "I see many people here who could benefit from a gift, a chance, or an opportunity," Adrian continued. "But I have to admit, I rarely see someone ask the right question with such honesty. Your question, it's not about status, not about charm, not about what you already have. It's about potential and purpose, and that makes all the difference." Sophia felt a rush of emotion she couldn't name, pride, relief, hope, maybe all three at once. She realized that by daring to ask what she truly wanted to know, she had captured the attention of someone who could, in a very real way, change her life. Around them, the atmosphere shifted. Guests whispered among themselves, cameras clicked, and some moved closer to witness the unfolding interaction. Adrian, who had been a figure of distant admiration, now felt tangible, human, and approachable, yet still commanding respect. And Sophia, who had walked into this room feeling small and invisible, now stood at the center of a moment that felt as if the world had narrowed down to just her and the man before her. For a long minute, they simply looked at each other. Words were unnecessary. In that silence there was understanding. There was recognition. There was the unspoken acknowledgement that sometimes a single question asked with courage and honesty could shift the balance of possibility. Finally, Sophia took a deep breath and said softly, "I didn't mean to be rude, I just wanted to know if you see someone who could do something meaningful if given a chance." Adrian's expression softened further. "You are not rude," he said. "Far from it, you are brave." And sometimes bravery is the first step toward greatness. At that moment, Sophia understood that the evening had changed. The room, with all its grandeur and elegance, no longer mattered. The wealth, the power, the carefully curated appearances of the guests, all of it faded in significance compared to the raw human connection that had just formed. She smiled, her nervousness now replaced with a quiet confidence. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if her question would lead to opportunity, mentorship, or even recognition. But she had spoken her truth, and that, she realized, was the most important first step. And Adrian, the millionaire who had seen countless people ask for favors and donations, felt something stir within him, a recognition that perhaps this girl, small and unassuming, had reminded him of the very reason he had started giving back in the first place. That sometimes, the most important question was not about what someone already had, but about what they could do if given the chance. And in that moment, the stage was set for a choice that would shock the audience, change a young girl's life, and remind everyone present that courage, honesty, and purpose could matter more than wealth, status, or appearances. After the brief, intense moment at the ballroom's edge, Adrian could not shake the image of Sophia from his mind. He returned to observing the crowd, but now everything looked different. The laughter, the polite conversations, even the clinking of glasses seemed distant, as if the room had suddenly become smaller, focusing entirely on the girl who had asked a simple question that carried so much weight. He had spent decades making decisions based on logic, market trends, and societal expectations, yet here was a question that no formula could answer. Who deserves a chance? Sophia, meanwhile, moved quietly toward the refreshments, trying to calm the flutter in her chest. Her hands trembled slightly, but her eyes kept searching the room, wondering if she had been too bold, too forward, or completely out of place. People glanced at her here and there, curious about the moment they had witnessed. Some whispered among themselves, impressed that a young girl had spoken directly to a millionaire without hesitation. Others simply shook their heads, thinking she was naive. Sophia, however, cared little for opinions. She had said what she needed to say, and that felt more important than any approval or criticism. Adrian walked slowly after her, maintaining a respectful distance. He wanted to observe, not to intimidate, to understand rather than judge. He remembered his own youth, the years he had spent trying to find someone who believed in him, the rare moments when a mentor or benefactor had seen potential in him that he hadn't yet recognized in himself. He understood that encouragement, guidance, and opportunity could be more valuable than any sum of money. As he reached Sophia, she looked up, startled but composed. "Excuse me, young lady," he began, his voice low and steady. "May I walk with you for a moment?" Sophia nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. They moved together along the edge of the room, careful to avoid drawing too much attention, though it was clear that some of the guests were quietly watching the exchange. Adrian spoke first. "You asked me a question that I haven't been asked in a very long time. It's honest, simple, and yet it challenges me in ways I did not expect." He paused, considering his words. "I want to understand more about what you mean by someone to pick." Sophia took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. I mean someone who could make a real difference if given a chance. Someone who wants to do good, not just someone who already has everything. I see people like you do a lot of things for charity, but often, it's someone who is already successful who benefits the most. I wanted to know if you would consider someone like me, or like my friends, who have ideas but not the resources. Her voice grew steadier as she spoke. "We just want the chance to do something meaningful." Adrian nodded slowly, impressed not only by her clarity but also by the humility in her words. He could see that she wasn't asking for wealth or recognition. She was asking for an opportunity to prove herself and to contribute to something bigger than herself. It was rare to meet someone who understood the weight of responsibility alongside ambition. He gestured toward a quieter corner of the ballroom where they could talk without interruption. "Tell me about your project," he said. "I want to hear everything." Sophia's eyes lit up, and suddenly the nerves faded. She spoke passionately about her nonprofit initiative, explaining how she and a few friends had started after noticing that children in their community lacked access to books, educational programs, and safe spaces to learn. She described how they organized small reading groups, arranged for volunteers to tutor the kids, and even fundraised by baking and selling cookies at local events. It was modest, she admitted, but it was growing, and the children were thriving. Adrian listened intently, asking thoughtful questions along the way. He asked about the challenges she faced, the obstacles she had overcome, and the impact she had already made. With every answer, he could see her dedication and her vision. There was no grand plan for personal gain, no desire for fame, only a clear drive to help others and make a difference. Meanwhile, some of the guests had begun to notice their conversation and murmured among themselves. A few glanced at Adrian with curiosity, wondering why he was taking the time to speak with a young girl instead of mingling with more influential attendees. Some of them assumed it was a fleeting gesture of politeness, while others could not hide their skepticism. Adrian, however, was beyond caring about appearances. He felt a growing certainty that this moment mattered more than any public relations opportunity or superficial impression. As Sophia shared her story, she spoke of the children who had inspired her most, kids who, despite difficult circumstances, were eager to learn, full of creativity and hope. She described how one boy, who struggled with reading at first, had written his first story after weeks of tutoring, and how a small group of girls had formed a club to create art for the local hospital. Each story she told was a testament to resilience, creativity, and the small victories that could be overlooked by the larger world. Adrian smiled quietly to himself. He realized that this was not just about charity or funding. It was about nurturing potential. In all his years of giving, he had sometimes focused on outcomes, numbers, or publicity. Yet here was a young girl teaching him that the true value of generosity was in believing in people who had not yet been seen or heard. Sophia noticed a change in Adrian's expression. It was as if he was no longer just a distant millionaire at a public event, but a mentor and ally, someone who could help transform ideas into reality. The thought gave her a mixture of hope and nervous excitement. She had never imagined that her words could have such an effect. He leaned forward slightly, his voice calm but deliberate. "It takes courage to speak up like this," he said. "Most people stay silent when they see someone like you standing on the edge of opportunity. You asked, and that makes all the difference." Sophia felt a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that sometimes, courage was not about knowing the right answer or having the perfect plan. It was simply about being honest and asking the question that others were too afraid to ask. She nodded slowly, absorbing his words. Adrian continued, "I have met many people tonight, but very few have shown the insight and determination you have. You understand something that many adults fail to grasp, the value of potential over privilege. That is rare, and it is why I want to know more about you, your team, and the work you're doing." Sophia's heart raced. She had expected kindness, maybe a moment of acknowledgement, but not this genuine interest and engagement. For the first time in her life, she felt seen not just for what she had done, but for what she could become. They walked together through the room, occasionally passing groups of guests who stared in surprise. Some whispered to each other, trying to figure out why Adrian Cole, a man of immense influence, was engaging in such a personal, unhurried conversation with a teenage girl. Some speculated that he was testing her, others that he was merely being polite, but both guesses fell short of the truth. Adrian was not performing. He was connecting. He was seeing potential where it had not yet been noticed, and he felt a responsibility to honor it. Sophia explained the practical challenges her project faced: limited funds, scarce materials, and a shortage of volunteers. She spoke openly about her dreams for the future, expanding the initiative, reaching more children, and creating sustainable programs that could last long after she was no longer directly involved. Her eyes shone with determination, and Adrian could see the spark that drove her forward despite all obstacles. He thought back to his own life, to the mentors and benefactors who had once believed in him when no one else did. He remembered how transformative it had been to have someone recognize potential before success was visible. That memory made the decision he was contemplating feel both urgent and natural. Adrian finally paused and looked at Sophia directly. "You have vision, persistence, and heart. But most importantly," he said slowly, "you are willing to act on your convictions, even when the world might not notice or support you. That quality cannot be bought, taught, or borrowed. It is rare, and it is what makes the difference between potential and impact." Sophia felt a surge of emotion. She had never been praised in this way before. She had worked tirelessly, often in silence, without expectation of recognition or reward. Yet here was a man whose judgment mattered, acknowledging the essence of her work and the sincerity of her intentions. The evening continued around them, the orchestra playing softly in the background, guests chatting, glasses clinking. Yet in that small space, a quiet transformation was happening. Adrian's mind raced through possibilities: mentorship, investment, guidance, resources. How could he help ensure that her potential was realized? How could he provide support in a way that was meaningful, responsible, and transformative? Sophia noticed that he was no longer merely listening. He was thinking, calculating, and envisioning ways to create real impact. She realized that this was the kind of attention her project needed, the kind of partnership that could turn small efforts into something larger, sustainable, and truly life-changing. The moment stretched, filled with unspoken understanding and mutual respect. Neither of them felt the need to rush or perform. The room, the wealth, and the audience had faded into the background. What remained was potential, vision, and the quiet power of one question that had shifted the course of a life. Adrian finally spoke, his voice resolute yet gentle. "I think we should explore this further," he said. "I want to know more about your goals, your team, and your approach. This could be something significant not just for you but for many others who could benefit from your work. You have the spark, Sophia, and I want to help you nurture it." Sophia's eyes widened, a mixture of disbelief, hope, and excitement flooding her. The dream she had carried silently for so long, the vision she had pursued quietly, was suddenly being acknowledged by someone with the means, influence, and experience to make it real. She nodded, almost speechless, but her heart was full of determination. At that moment, the room felt different. People continued to move around them, unaware that a small yet profound story was unfolding. A young girl's courage had met a man's vision and empathy, creating the conditions for change that extended far beyond the walls of the ballroom. Sophia realized that her life had shifted with one honest question, and Adrian understood that sometimes the most important decisions were not about money or power, but about seeing potential and choosing to invest in it. The room seemed to hold its breath as Adrian's words settled in the air. Sophia felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had dared to speak her truth, and now that truth was being recognized by someone whose influence could truly change lives. But even as hope swelled inside her, she couldn't ignore the tiny whisper of doubt at the back of her mind. Would he follow through? Would this be just another fleeting moment of attention that faded when the evening ended? Adrian, too, felt the weight of the moment pressing upon him. He had spent years giving, helping, investing, and mentoring. yet nothing had prepared him for a decision that carried so much meaning beyond numbers or headlines. Here was a young girl, honest and unassuming, standing before him with nothing but vision and courage, asking for an opportunity that could ripple far beyond her own life. He knew that the right choice here could transform not just one life, but countless others if her potential was nurtured. He glanced around the ballroom, taking in the guests who were now starting to notice their conversation. There were influential business people, philanthropists and socialites, all dressed in the finest attire and accustomed to receiving recognition themselves. Many of them had quietly approached him earlier, seeking favor, perhaps hoping to secure a donation or mentorship for their own projects. And yet, here he was, fully engaged with a teenager whose accomplishments were humble and whose audience was small. A few guests whispered, speculating about what was unfolding. "Is he really listening to her?" one asked. "Why is he spending so much time with a girl who isn't even known in the city's social circles?" Another guest scoffed quietly, shaking their head. "It's unusual, yes, but we all know how these things go. It's likely just a polite gesture." But Adrian didn't hear any of it. His focus was entirely on Sophia, on her dreams, and on the question that had changed the rhythm of the evening. Sophia, for her part, felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. Her words had been heard, but she knew that being seen was only the first step. The real test lay ahead, whether someone with the power to help her would choose to act. She explained further, describing how her project had grown steadily despite limited resources. She spoke of the children who had once struggled to read, now writing their own stories. She shared anecdotes of kids who had discovered art, music, and science through the small programs she had organized. Her passion was palpable, and Adrian could see the fire of genuine purpose in her eyes. "You've done remarkable work," Adrian said thoughtfully. "But there's something more here than just what you've accomplished. It's your vision, your persistence, your willingness to take responsibility. Most people wait for someone else to notice, to provide guidance, or to give approval. You've stepped forward without expecting anything in return." Sophia nodded slowly, realizing that he understood the essence of her journey. She had always believed in the power of small acts to create change, but it was rare to find someone who recognized that value beyond superficial metrics. Adrian's words were not just praise, they were a validation of her vision, a recognition that someone powerful was willing to consider her potential seriously. The moment stretched, heavy with anticipation. Adrian looked around the room once more, as if weighing the social expectations against his own instincts. Many of the guests were clearly waiting for a dramatic display of generosity, an announcement, a flashy donation, or a public recognition of someone already successful. That was the usual pattern, the predictable outcome. But Adrian realized that the predictable choice would not honor the moment, nor would it honor Sophia's courage. He thought back to his own beginnings, when he had struggled to find mentors, support, and opportunities. He remembered the moments when a single person had believed in him, changing the trajectory of his life in ways that no wealth or fame could replicate. He understood that sometimes, real change required seeing potential where others didn't, taking a chance on someone unproven and investing not just money, but time, guidance, and belief. Adrian took a deep breath and made his decision. He would not choose the obvious candidate, the one with connections, the one who already had status. He would choose someone who had vision, courage, and integrity, the qualities that could truly transform lives when combined with opportunity. He knelt slightly to Sophia's level, smiling gently. "Sophia," he said, his voice calm but firm, "I have made my choice." Sophia's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped, dreamed, but she had not dared to assume that this moment would be hers. She leaned forward slightly, trying to read his expression, searching for any hint of jest or hesitation. "I want to invest in someone with true potential," he continued. Someone who is driven not by wealth, status, or recognition, but by purpose, passion, and the desire to create change. That person is you. The words hit her like a wave. For a moment, she could barely comprehend them. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came. Her chest swelled with a mix of disbelief, excitement, and overwhelming gratitude. Adrian smiled reassuringly, giving her a moment to absorb the reality of his announcement. The guests around them began to murmur, noticing the unexpected turn of events. Cameras flashed, and a few whispers of astonishment swept through the room. Many had expected him to choose someone established, someone who would provide a more conventional story of generosity. Instead, he had chosen a young girl with a humble project and immense potential, defying the audience's expectations and social norms. Sophia finally found her voice. I don't know what to say," she stammered, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, I promise I won't waste this opportunity." Adrian's eyes twinkled. "I don't expect you to waste it. I expect you to grow it, nurture it, and make it something that can help others reach their potential as well. This is more than funding. It is guidance, support, and belief. And I will be with you throughout the journey, not to take control, but to provide the tools and mentorship you need to succeed." A hush fell over the nearby guests. The moment was extraordinary not because of grandeur, but because of authenticity. Here was a millionaire, choosing to invest in someone with no fame, no wealth, no pretense, simply someone with heart, courage, and vision. The audacity of the choice, the purity of intent, left many speechless. Sophia felt a warmth spread through her entire being. She realized that this decision could change not just her life, but the lives of the children her project served. She thought of the boys and girls who had struggled with reading, the ones who had discovered their creative talents through her small programs. She thought of her friends who had worked alongside her, believing in the same dream, often without recognition. And now, all of that effort, all of that hope, was about to expand into something far larger than she had ever imagined. Adrian noticed the mixture of awe and disbelief on her face. He smiled, understanding the significance of the moment. "Sophia," he said softly, "remember that this is not about me or my money. It is about you, your vision, and the lives you touch. That is what matters. You have the ability to change the world in ways that wealth alone cannot achieve." The crowd had begun to quiet down, watching in respectful silence as the unlikely partnership was formed. Some guests were inspired, seeing a young person recognized for courage and vision rather than status. Others were skeptical, unsure how this decision would unfold, but even they could not deny the authenticity of the moment. Sophia felt a surge of determination. She realized that she had not only been given an opportunity, but also a responsibility. The trust placed in her by Adrian was profound, and she knew that she had to honor it fully. She promised herself that she would work tirelessly, ensure the project thrived, and live up to the faith shown in her potential. Adrian, watching her, felt a sense of satisfaction that was deeper than any business success or public recognition he had ever achieved. He knew that sometimes, the most meaningful impact came not from large gestures to the obvious recipients, but from investing in someone who had the courage to ask, the vision to act, and the integrity to use opportunity wisely. For the rest of the evening, Sophia and Adrian discussed plans in detail. They talked about expanding the program, organizing new initiatives, and connecting with other mentors who could provide guidance. Adrian's approach was practical and thoughtful, focusing not on instant results, but on sustainable growth and lasting impact. He wanted Sophia to understand the importance of responsibility alongside opportunity, and she listened with admiration and focus. By the time the evening drew to a close, the story of Adrian's choice had begun to ripple through the crowd. People spoke quietly of the unusual decision, of the courage of a young girl who dared to ask a question that challenged social norms, and of a millionaire who defied expectations to recognize and nurture potential. It was a story that would be remembered, not for the grandeur of wealth, but for the humanity of the moment. Sophia left the ballroom that night with her mind racing, heart full, and a new sense of purpose. She knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. Challenges awaited, and responsibilities would grow. But she also knew that she had been given something far more valuable than money alone: belief, mentorship, and an opportunity to amplify her impact in ways she had only dreamed of. Adrian watched her leave with a quiet satisfaction, knowing that his choice had not only transformed a life, but had reminded him of the real reason he had dedicated so much of his life to giving back: to empower those who were willing to step forward, ask the right questions, and act with purpose. That night, in the quiet aftermath of applause and conversation, a young girl's courage and a man's vision had converged. The ripple of that moment would extend far beyond the walls of the hotel, creating opportunities, inspiring others, and proving that sometimes the most shocking and meaningful choices were the ones guided by heart, integrity, and belief in unseen potential. The weeks that followed the charity event were filled with a whirlwind of activity and emotion for Sophia. The moment she had dared to ask her question, and the unexpected response from Adrian, had set off a chain of events she could never have imagined. Suddenly, her small initiative, which had once operated quietly in a corner of her community, was thrust into the spotlight. But more than the attention, it was the support and guidance she now had that would truly transform her project and, in time, her own life. Adrian invited Sophia to his office for their first official meeting. It was a sleek, modern space, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the city. Sophia felt nervous stepping into such an environment. She had always been comfortable in her neighborhood, among children, friends, and volunteers who shared her vision. Here, everything was different. Luxury surrounded her, polished floors reflected the light, and people moved with the confidence of someone used to power and influence. Yet, Adrian greeted her warmly, with the same patience and attentiveness he had shown at the event. "Welcome, Sophia," he said with a smile. "I want to hear everything about your plans and how you imagine the future of your project." Sophia took a deep breath and began describing, in detail, the programs she had already implemented. She spoke of the reading circles she had organized for younger children, the tutoring sessions led by volunteers, and the small art and music programs that gave children the chance to explore their creativity. She talked about the challenges she faced: limited funds, lack of proper materials, and the struggle to maintain consistent volunteers, but also about the successes that gave her hope. Adrian listened carefully, taking notes, asking questions, and suggesting ideas. He asked about scalability, sustainability, and ways to measure impact, but he did so not to criticize, but to guide Sophia in thinking strategically. He explained the importance of setting achievable goals and creating a framework that could grow over time. It was the kind of mentorship Sophia had only dreamed of, yet it felt natural and supportive rather than intimidating. Over the next few months, their collaboration began to take shape. Adrian introduced Sophia to people who could help: educational experts, community organizers, and volunteers with specialized skills. He helped secure funding not just for immediate needs, but for long-term sustainability. Sophia, who had once worried about how she would provide books for a few dozen children, now had the resources to expand her programs to multiple neighborhoods. She could hire staff, create structured curriculums, and provide materials that would ensure the children's learning was continuous and engaging. The transformation was both exhilarating and challenging. Sophia had to learn to manage a growing team, handle budgets, and communicate with people from very different backgrounds. There were moments of self-doubt, when the weight of responsibility seemed overwhelming, but Adrian's mentorship was constant. He offered advice, encouragement, and at times, gentle correction when decisions could have unintended consequences. He taught her that leadership was not about control, but about empowering others, listening, and thinking ahead. Sophia's confidence grew alongside the project. She discovered strengths she had never realized she possessed: the ability to organize, inspire, and problem-solve. She learned to balance her ideals with practicality, to recognize both the possibilities and limitations inherent in any endeavor. The children in her programs began to thrive in ways she had only imagined. Reading levels improved, creativity flourished, and a sense of community developed among participants. Parents and local teachers noticed the difference, and word of the initiative spread, attracting more volunteers and support. One particularly memorable day, Sophia received a letter from a young girl who had joined her program 6 months earlier. The girl wrote about how the reading circle had inspired her to write her own short stories, how she now dreamed of becoming a teacher herself, and how the small art workshops had given her a voice she never thought she had. Sophia read the letter aloud to Adrian during one of their meetings. Adrian smiled, quietly acknowledging that this was the kind of impact that could never be measured in dollars alone. Through it all, Sophia remained humble and grounded. She remembered the nervous teenager she had been at the charity event, standing at the edge of a grand ballroom, unsure of her place. The support she received from Adrian did not make her forget where she came from. It reinforced her commitment to the children, families, and communities that had shaped her vision. She learned that true leadership involved giving others the confidence and tools to achieve their own potential, just as she had been given the opportunity to grow. Adrian, too, found the experience transformative. He had always believed in giving back, but this partnership reminded him of the deeper power of mentorship. Helping Sophia realize her vision was not about publicity or social standing. It was about seeing potential and nurturing it. He watched as she evolved into a capable, confident leader, and in that growth, he found a profound sense of fulfillment. For the first time in years, he felt the tangible impact of his guidance in a deeply personal way. As the project expanded, Sophia began to implement new programs inspired by her observations and the feedback she received from children and volunteers. She started after-school workshops in science and technology, creative writing sessions, and community gardening projects. Each new initiative was carefully planned to foster skills, self-confidence, and curiosity. The children were eager to participate, and many began mentoring their peers, creating a cycle of learning and leadership that extended beyond Sophia's immediate reach. Sophia also developed a team of young volunteers who shared her vision. She taught them the values of empathy, responsibility, and creativity. Under her guidance, they learned to manage projects, lead workshops, and communicate effectively with children and families. Adrian encouraged this growth, emphasizing the importance of creating leaders who could sustain and expand the work, even if he or Sophia were not present. News of Sophia's project began to attract attention. Local media outlets covered the story of a young girl whose determination and vision had created a meaningful impact in her community. People were inspired not just by the results, but by the courage and honesty that had initiated it all, the single question she had asked at the charity event. Sophia's story became a symbol of hope, illustrating how one person's courage, when met with support and mentorship, could spark change far beyond their own immediate environment. Despite the growing recognition and the increasing demands of her work, Sophia remained committed to the children she served. She maintained personal connections with participants, ensuring that every child felt seen and valued. She celebrated their achievements, no matter how small, and encouraged them to pursue their passions. In doing so, she reinforced the core principle that had guided her from the beginning: Opportunity and encouragement could unlock potential in ways that resources alone could not. Adrian often reflected on the lessons he had learned from Sophia. He realized that impact was not measured solely by wealth or influence, but by the ability to recognize and nurture potential in others. By investing in her, he had amplified his ability to create change far beyond what he could accomplish alone. The partnership between them became a model for meaningful mentorship, one that prioritized vision, integrity, and courage over status or wealth. Years later, the transformation was undeniable. Sophia's initiative had grown into a comprehensive organization, reaching hundreds of children across the city and inspiring similar projects in other communities. The children who had once struggled with basic skills were now confident, curious, and thriving. Many had discovered passions that would shape their futures: writing, art, science, and leadership. Parents, educators, and community leaders acknowledged the profound impact, and Sophia's approach became a case study in how dedication, mentorship, and strategic support could create lasting change. Sophia herself had grown into a remarkable leader. She carried with her the lessons of humility, responsibility, and vision. She never forgot the nervous teenager who had dared to ask a question that changed everything. That single act of courage had led to mentorship, opportunity, and transformation, not just for her, but for everyone touched by her work. Adrian, watching from the sidelines, knew that the most meaningful impact came from believing in someone's potential and providing the guidance and resources to bring it to life. The experience reminded him why he had committed so much of his life to giving back, not to gain recognition, but to create opportunities for those who could, in turn, inspire and uplift others. The story of Sophia and Adrian became more than just a local news item or a charity success story. It became a lesson in courage, mentorship, and the power of asking the right question. It illustrated that real change often begins with honesty, vision, and the willingness to step forward when no one else expects you to. It showed that opportunities could be transformative when combined with guidance, support, and belief in potential. In the end, the journey that began with a single, simple question, "Would you pick one of us?" had blossomed into a movement of possibility. A young girl's courage met a man's vision, creating a ripple effect that touched lives far beyond the ballroom, far beyond the city, and far beyond what either could have imagined. Sophia often looked back on that night, the night she asked a question that seemed so small at the time but changed everything. She remembered the nervous excitement, the hesitation, the courage it had taken to speak up. And she understood that life-changing moments often start quietly, in the courage to ask, the willingness to believe, and the vision to act. Adrian, too, remembered the night vividly. He recalled the sincerity in Sophia's eyes, the simple but profound question, and the opportunity to invest not just money, but guidance, belief, and mentorship. That night reinforced a lifelong truth. The most meaningful impact comes from recognizing potential where others see none, and from choosing to act in support of that potential. And so the story continued, Sophia's initiative thriving, children growing and learning, and the city witnessing the power of one courageous question and one thoughtful, unexpected choice. It was a story that would inspire generations, proving that with honesty, courage, mentorship, and belief in human potential, the possibilities were limitless.